just thinking about the number 400. When you think about it, what does that number mean to you?
At the time, it didn't really mean anything to me. You know, I was really naive and didn't really take the time to think about batting averages and stuff like that, and so it didn't really sink in or mean that much to me until well after I had hit 400. And in fact, I didn't realize that it was such a big deal until Katrina came to Texas. When was it? In 1995, when Katrina came to Texas.
A little bit after that, because I was born in '95. I want to say Katrina was early 2000s.
Yeah, right. Because there was a player that was playing for the New Orleans AAA team there, the New Orleans Zephyrs, and he was playing in New Orleans, and Katrina came and wiped out all of their home games. This was like September, the end of the season, and a reporter called me and said that, did you know that there's a player with the Zephyrs that's hitting near 400? He was hitting like 385 or 390 or something like that. I said, no, I never kept track of players and their averages during the season. He said, yeah, and he's doing, he's doing well. So, and I said, well, good luck to him. I said, what's he hitting? He says, you're the last player that hit 400 in pro baseball. And I had never thought of averages that much. And so I said, oh, good luck to him. I hope he does it. And then Katrina came and wiped out all of his home games. He had to play everything else the remainder of the season on the road. And I guess in New Orleans, I never played there, but I guess New Orleans is a very good hitting park, a big park, and everything is favorable to hitting. And so anyway, he didn't hit 400. He ended up hitting 389, 390 or something, and that's when I started thinking about 400. I said, what's going on with 400? And then I found out, God, And then I started keeping track somewhat of baseball players in the minor leagues and averages and stuff, but no one's come close since. There's been a couple of players that had hit 400, that were hitting 400, but it wasn't over the whole season, that had been called up from the minor leagues to the big leagues. But when I hit 400 in 1961, Houston only had two baseball teams at the time. They had the team I was playing on in Salisbury, and then the Houston Buffs, which is a AAA baseball team in Houston. And I got called up at the end of the season and finished the season with the Buffs and finished the season hitting 400. And so that was kind of my introduction to 400, and then what it meant was something later on. I didn't realize even at the time that 400 was such a big deal. So,
what has it turned into now?
Well, it's turned into something really special, because I was at a meeting this afternoon, the Tacoma Athletic Commission meeting with Mark, and believe it or not, they were talking about baseball, and they had I forget his name, the general manager for the Houston baseball team there, and he was talking about the season and the games and all the stuff that the players had did last year, and I asked the question if he thought that anyone would ever hit 400 over a whole season, and he said, what I thought at the time, he said no, he didn't think so, because it changed so much since 1961, especially the pitching part of it. Pitchers don't go as far as they can go. They have pitch counts, and usually you see pitchers that get 100 pitches, they're out of there no matter what the score is or what they've done. And so with the relief pitching and the changes in what pitchers have to do and can't do after 100 pitches, just makes it almost impossible. And now, no teams playing in the major leagues have just two ball clubs. In fact, all of the teams now have AAA, AA, A, and maybe some C and D teams, and multiple teams. And if a guy's doing real well, they'll get called up to the next level and next level and right on up. And so no one has a chance to hit 400 like they did when I was playing with just two teams. But it's really something that I don't think will happen again, not in my lifetime. So it's really nice to let people know that you hit 400 in 1961, and it's been 61 years since it's happened, and so I get teased about it a lot, but it was a memorable year.
I bet it
Yeah.
was.
In 1961, I was a student at the University of San Francisco, and it was my second year at USF. I graduated in 1959, going to the University of San Francisco in 1959, 1960. In 1961, I signed a pro baseball contract with the Houston Astros. They were a new team, going to be a new team in the National League. And I did it for the money. We grew up in a poor neighborhood, and we didn't have much money. My father was a minister, my mother was a minister, and they were not wealthy, and so I signed for the money. I got a little money to sign, and when I signed it, they didn't have, the things that they have now as far as players being picked in the first, second, third round, or whatever. They didn't have that at all. So I was just signed with Houston. And the Houston Spring Training Club, we went to Jacksonville, Florida for that spring training. And then from after spring training, we went to either Salisbury, North Carolina, which team I played for, or the Houston Buffs, which is a AAA ball club. And so I went to Salisbury. I was the only black player for a month. There was one other black guy on the team, but he was there for about a month, and then he was released or whatever. And so I was the only black player on the team playing in Salisbury, which was absolutely terrible. And the reason that I was able to get by in Salisbury, I was 19 years old, was because there was a college in Salisbury, North Carolina, called Livingston College, an HBCU college. And I got to know a lot of the kids that were going to school there that were sticking around for the summer. And they told me where I could go to get food at night after the games, and we hung out together on off days and stuff like that. And I was from Oakland and had never seen the prejudice and racism that I experienced in Salisbury. It was just unique to me. But they got me through it, and I played there for the whole season. After the season ended, I was called up to the Buffs, which were playing, they were playing games in the AAA league that they were in, and I met them. I got a new car, and I met a guy by the name of Tommy Murray, who was a good friend of mine. After games, we'd have road games on the bus, and the bus would stop at restaurants, and they'd go eat dinner and stuff, and I couldn't go in any of the places to eat. He would bring me stuff back to eat, and so we got to know each other real well, and he and I drove together to Houston. He lived in Marshall, Texas. So I dropped him off in Marshall, Texas, drove my car to Houston, Texas, parked my car at the stadium, wherever there was in the stadium, the Houston Stadium. It wasn't the Astrodome or anything like that then. It was just the stadium where they played ball, and parked my car there. Got a plane and met the team in Omaha, Nebraska. And I hadn't been on flights before, and I was in a suit and tie waiting for the team bus after getting to Omaha, Nebraska. And a man came up to me and threw me his car keys and asked me to park his car. And I couldn't believe it. And I didn't say anything, but got his keys. Team bus came, got on the bus, and on the way to the stadium, I threw his keys out the window on the freeway. And I said, geez, what's going on? Then Hurricane Carla hit, and we didn't have many games at Houston, hardly any at all. And so the season ended, and I Houston was not that much better either at the time. And went to Houston, took a physical, had to go in the back door to see the doctor. The team doctor couldn't go in the front door. Got a flight from Houston to Oakland, and that was how I got introduced to Houston, was through that experience in 1961, signing with the Houston Colt 45s at the time. It was a Houston Buffs, and then after that 1963 season, they were the Houston Colt 45s. And I got married in 1962, and my wife and I lived in Houston for that most of that season before I got sent out again to the AAA team, which was in Oklahoma City, and played there, played in Durham, North Carolina, went back to Houston, played in Venezuela, played in Nicaragua, back to Houston. But anyway, it was quite an experience and my introduction to Houston. What I remember of it, I haven't been back other than for football since, but it was not a great place to play either. And in fact, it was tough. When I was there in Houston, I thought I should have made the team, but Houston was going to field a team that had 5 African-American players that played and 4 white players that played, and they said that they didn't want to have a whole outfield and half the infield black guys in Houston. And so I was the chosen one that went down to Oklahoma City and played there. And it was just terrible. It was a tough place to play. I ended up in Tacoma. It was kind of a freakish thing. We were in Houston, and Joe Morgan was on the team, and some of the guys I played with during the time coming up, and in fact, Joe Morgan's book, he writes about the incident that got me traded to the Chicago Cubs. And the incident was a situation. I came to the ballpark early to take some batting practice, and Rusty Staub was there. And I walked in, and he didn't see me, and I went to my locker room, and I hear Rusty talking to some players, and I heard him say, Aaron Pointer, he's a good nigger. I said, what the heck? And so I confronted Rusty about what he said. But anyway, we had a fight, and after the fight, I was called to the office a couple of days later and told that I had been traded from Houston to Chicago Cubs. And I said, oh, great. I'll be playing with the Cubs. They don't have any lights. They don't play any night games. And if you played baseball before, you can see better during the day than you could at night, especially at that time. We didn't have the lights that they have now at night, where it's like daylight ball. But went to Chicago. I thought I'd be playing in Chicago, but Chicago sent me to Tacoma, which was their AAA club. And that's how I got introduced to Tacoma in 1968 with a trade from Houston to Chicago Cubs.
That's very
And yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
The 1961 season, you mentioned that you were the only black player on the team.
Yeah.
Did that strike you as odd that you were?
I didn't think much of it at the time, but because I just ignored it at the time. I was 19 years old, very naive, and the place that I played in 1961 was a college team, a college baseball field there in Salisbury. But what was odd was how the seating arrangements were. They had a section for black people to go and a section for white folks to go, and they didn't intermingle at all. And I would hear the catcalls and the names and stuff. And in fact, there were newspaper articles that were complaining about me being on the team, and that I was showering with the white players and I shouldn't be, and all kinds of stuff. And in fact, there was an incident where a kid, and I was an outfielder, and there's a kid in the outfield that was shooting BBs at me with a BB gun and stuff like that. And so it wasn't odd when we were playing games, but it was odd after the games were over because there were no places for me to live. I lived in a place where there were some real religious people for a while, and I knew I wasn't going to get along with them. They were, really religious, and although my parents were ministers, my religious thoughts were not what their thoughts were, and so I only stayed there for a month. And then I ended up staying in a motel about 10 miles, 15 miles away from ballpark. So I had to drive all the way to and from the ballpark, and that was odd because in Oakland at the time it was like 60-70% black in West Oakland where I grew up, and so that was odd. But when I was playing ball, I was just playing ball. I wasn't worried about all the other stuff, and so it wasn't it wasn't that much of an effect on me playing there other than when I wasn't playing. The movie theaters there was nothing to do. The movie theaters were separated. There was segregation at movie theaters. Parks, and there was segregation at the parks. They had a swimming pool there that they had just passed the anti-segregation law, and the people in Salisbury, rather than letting black kids swim in the swimming pool with white kids, they closed the pool, took all the water out, and let nobody swim in it. That kind of stuff going on. Plus, the freedom rides were just starting. I wasn't involved in it because I wasn't into politics hardly at all. But the kids, and in fact, John Lewis and a contingent of his followers had a bus that came through Salisbury in 1961 on their way to Mississippi for voter registration. I didn't know what was going on, but they were there, and I look back on it now and I say, oh man, I could have, really had some problems. But anyway, it was different off the field, but on the field when I go to the ballpark, it was like, whew, I'm in my zone now. And it's probably why I did so well, because I was really in my zone as far as hitting and playing ball and doing well in ball, and I just worried about winning and doing well myself, and I didn't care about batting averages or nothing. And in fact, I found out later in the season, my coach there, I never forget him, his name was Alex Cosmides. He was the coach for me in Salisbury, and also the coach in winter ball when I played in Venezuela in the next year in 1962. But Alex Cosmides was a good guy, and he came to me at the last game of our season. Our team was tied for first place, and if we won a game, we could win the championship. If we lost, we'd finish second. And so he asked me if I wanted to play or not, and I said, why? What do you mean if I wanted to play? And he says, you're hitting .401. I said, so what? I said, sure, I want to play. And so I played in the game and went 2 for 3 and ended up hitting .402 for the season. And that was not a big deal for me. It turned out to be a big deal, but at the time it was just another game, and the rest, I guess you can say, is history. But it was, 1961 was really a strange year as far as off the field activities that I was involved in, and Livingston College there in Salisbury helped get me through that period of time. It was just a group of kids and people there that kind of probably helped me get through it, because I don't know if I could have made it without them there.
Was it safe to say that the ballpark was your safe space?
It was my safe space. I really felt at home in the ballpark. Players were great. Nobody that I knew of did anything or said anything against me playing. I'm sure it probably happened because that was what was going on at the time in the South. But for me, the ballpark and playing at with all the guys that I played with was really my safe space and where I felt most at home. And then after the season was over, I'd go back home, and it was nice to be a celebrity at home and see the people that I'd missed during the season and do all of those things. And so, but the ballpark was where I felt at home, where I was doing well, and what helped me get through the season. I could have stayed at the ballpark 24 hours a day if it was up to me and lived there, but it was different. And at that time, things were so different between the South and the West, where I grew up in Oakland. Oakland, there was prejudice, I'm sure, because I can remember my parents telling me we couldn't go to Piedmont because if we did, the police would stop us. But I didn't want to go to Piedmont anyway. That's, heck, everything I liked and did was right around West Oakland, where I grew up. And so that wasn't a big deal to me. And so, but Salisbury was a big deal to me because of what I had to go through when the games were over. I probably got to do a lot of things that a lot of kids in that time couldn't do because of my celebrity of playing ball there, but I didn't notice it. I was just playing and doing my thing on the ball field, and luckily I was having a good year at the time too. So,
When you think about the success you had on the field, why do you think that you played so well, given all of the external factors that could have made it very easy for you not to play well and weighed you down? How did you keep just an incredible season going day in and day out?
Because it's something that I'd always done in high school and college. I played ball and did well and probably hit 400 there too, but I didn't pay any attention to it. And so I was just doing what I normally did playing ball in Oakland. I just went out, played, and did what I had to do. I hit well and ran well and did things that I needed to do to hit 400 and hit 400, but I didn't know about it at the time, so it wasn't anything strange to me, anything special that I did. It wasn't anything special at the ballpark. It was just doing what was comfortable for me and doing what I'd always done. And after the ball game was over, I dealt with what I had to deal with there, and I tried to stay away from it, and I did stay away from it. And so it didn't really affect me that much of what was happening to me, because I didn't realize at the time that I was being segregated and all the racism and stuff that I was going through. But I didn't really go through it because the restaurants I went to were all black restaurants. The places I went out were black folks, and so it was just kind of a normal thing for me. And so it didn't really affect me until I got to Houston, when we had to live in certain areas. And the same thing in Salisbury, but I was a single in Salisbury, so I had a lot more freedom. But my wife and I experienced the same thing in Houston and Oklahoma, where we had to live at certain areas. We went to Oklahoma City and had to live in a hotel until they found a place for us, whereas it was a black hotel. And so it was just so different off the field, that on the field was a place where I felt the most comfortable. And I took advantage of the fact that I was comfortable during that time, and I wasn't political at the time, and so it didn't really affect me that much. And so I was just lucky that I was having a good year, and to hit 400. Looking back, you've got to be lucky. You can't just go out and get a hit, because sometimes you hit the ball real well and make 3 outs, and you hit the ball crummy and break your bat, and the ball bloops in and you get a hit. I mean, those kind of things, you got to be lucky sometimes to hit 400. You don't get smash line drives every time up. I mean, there's got to be some luck involved, and I had a lot of luck that first season, and so I look back on it and says, God, that was luck. I was really lucky a lot of times to hit 400, because I didn't do anything differently after that, but things just didn't work out. Guys were better fielders, guys were faster, and so anyway, it was a good thing for me to be able to be my normal self at the ballpark, and God, I took advantage of that.
Had you ever heard of Salisbury before you moved there?
Had never heard of Salisbury, had never been in North Carolina in my life, and had never heard of Salisbury. I had never been outside of California ever, except Arkansas. My father and mother are from Arkansas, and I remember going to Little Rock, Arkansas, and Prescott, Arkansas is where we went, and my mother was from Prescott, Arkansas, and we'd go there in the summer times for a week or so, and that's the only time that I'd been out of California, was to go to Arkansas. And there we didn't go anyplace, we just stayed around the house, and so I never experienced any racism or prejudice, because we were just around our house all the time. We never went anyplace. They were protecting us. I look back now from the stuff that was going on, but I thought every place was like California. You just do your thing, and things, we had food to eat, and my father was doing okay, and mother was doing okay, and I had 4 sisters that were all doing okay, and so we were just having a good time with our family and doing things that kids at that age did. And so, yeah, it wasn't something that affected me. It's something that I thought about at all growing up.